turns out that pressing it as fast as possible is probably the best solution. In fact, there's one study that showed it even doubled the strength increase on the bench press.
Yeah, buddy. Lightweight, baby!
What's up, guys? I'm Josh and I lift things, and I'm here to talk about rep tempo. How fast should you do each rep? Too long didn't watch, lower the weight in a controlled manner, and then raise it up explosively. So this is a very commonly asked question. How fast should I do each rep? Some people claim that everything should be done as fast as possible. Others claim that everything should be done as slow as possible. Both are probably incorrect, but it kind of depends on your goals. Some people even say to hold the bottom position for half an hour. Okay, no one really says that, but I think you get the point. Like any other topic in the fitness space, this conversation is extremely simplistic, but there is a fair bit of nuance here as well. And unfortunately, the scientific literature doesn't actually clear the picture up all that well. Now, rep tempo, or again, how long each rep takes, is one of the training variables that can be altered to change a workout routine. It's right up there with intensity, volume, and frequency, terms I'm sure you've heard before, especially if you've been watching me for a while. When being programmed, it is often denoted as XXXX, with each X representing a variable for how long each portion of a rep takes in seconds. The first X is the negative or the eccentric portion of a lift. The second is the pause at the bottom of the movement. The third is the concentric portion, or the positive, or when you're pressing the weight back up. And the final number is the pause at the top. For instance, a 412X, or the same thing would be a 4120 on a barbell curl, would look like this. You would spend 4 seconds lowering the weight down. You would wait 1 second at the bottom. You would take 2 seconds to curl the weight back up, and then you wouldn't pause at the top at all. Before I get into the science of rep tempos or their usefulness, just keep in mind that depending on your goals or what you're trying to achieve, they're going to be different. For instance, a regular gym bro is probably just going to use touch and go bench, which means the second their bar touches the chest, they're pressing it back up. A power lifter is required to hold the bar on their chest until they get the command to press the weight. So a power lifter is forced to have an extended bottom position in the bench press while you are not. And this may or may not be beneficial for your own training. Shirt change. So regarding bar speed, especially on the way up, it turns out that pressing it as fast as possible is probably the best solution. In fact, there's one study that showed it even doubled the strength increase on the bench press. If we look here at the Stronger by Science article, here is the thinking behind lifting the bar as fast as you possibly can. To produce more force, your body uses more muscle fibers, as opposed to each fiber just contracting harder to produce more force. The first fibers your body uses are the smallest slow twitch fibers. To produce more and more force, it recruits progressively larger and stronger fibers, with your largest, strongest, fast twitch fibers being the last ones integrated into the movement. This is known as Henneman's size principle. Recruiting these fibers isn't based on the weight you're using per se, but rather the amount of force you produce. Force equals mass times acceleration. Shout out Physics 101. So all other things being equal, lifting a bar faster means you produced more force to lift it. Therefore, lifting the bar faster recruits more muscle fibers. The fast twitch muscle fibers, the last ones you recruit, are the ones most prone to hypertrophy, so lifting faster equals more fast twitch fibers used equals more strength and size gains. This sounds great, right? But the bulk of the previous research looking at the effects of lifting velocity on strength gain showed that there was no significant difference between lifting as fast as possible and lifting at a slower cadence. But wait a second, as the authors in this current study point out, much of the past research on subject was methodologically flawed. Many of the studies did not equate load and volume. If you're intentionally lifting the bar slower, you're not going to be able to handle as much weight or volume, so of course the protocol lifting at maximum speed would yield better results. In the bulk of studies showing no difference in lifting fast versus slow, they were doing sets taken a failure or close to it. Going back to Henneman's size principle, another application of it is that as the first fibers you recruit start fatiguing, you recruit larger and stronger fibers to take their place to keep producing force. Many of those studies weren't volume equated either. Additionally, regardless of what the cadence was supposed to be, when taking a set to failure, all of your reps will eventually end up being slow. So with these studies, the differences in actual bar speed weren't substantial, and the real takeaway is that if you push yourself to failure, rep speed doesn't matter as much. So they took 24 men, 4 of which dropped out, early to mid-20s, normal height and weight, healthy and physically active, with 2 to 4 years of recreational experience. But as they note here in the article, recreational is a arbitrary term. Their 1 rep maxes were around 75 kilograms to begin with, slightly more than 1 times body weight. So not complete beginners, they're not complete athletes. They essentially split the subject into 2 groups, one of which was a max velocity and one of which was a half velocity. And if you come down here, here's the average bar velocity in meters per second. The max group obviously much higher, 0.58. The low velocity is obviously lower, with the half velocity being actually pretty close to half velocity. Now, the total time under tension, of course, went up for the half velocity group. They were lifting with a much slower cadence. Now, here's the important bit, the improvements. Strength gains percentage improvement. Max velocity doubled in strength gains compared to half velocity. Now, obviously, that was only 20 test subjects in total, but this was a pretty well-designed study. Here, the article specifically notes that they had a point in the study that said sessions took place under supervision of the investigators at the same time of day, plus or minus 1 hour, for each participant and under constant environmental conditions, 20 degrees Celsius, 60% humidity. This is very important and something most research completely throws out the window. As they say here, time of day matters because circadian fluctuations and hormones like testosterone and cortisol may affect training outcomes. Additionally, heat and humidity can affect performance. If it's too hot and humid, you're more apt to fatigue because of thermostress and dehydration. If it's too cold, you have a harder time getting warm and performing well in the first place. So, I think most people would agree that lifting the weight as explosively as possible is useful, even if slowing the concentric phase of the lift would increase time under tension. Most people tend not to modulate that too much. But what about the eccentric phase of the lift, or the negative? Well, this study here, muscle time under tension during resistance exercise stimulates differential muscle protein subfractional synthetic responses in men. What the fuck does that mean? What it basically means is they did leg extension exercises at 30% of a 1 rep max, which is a load that is comparatively light in their words. I would say light as shit. With a slow lifting movement, 6 seconds up and 6 seconds down, performed to fatigue produces greater increases in rates of muscle protein synthesis than the same movement performed rapidly, 1 second up and 1 second down. These results suggest that the time the muscle is under tension during exercise may be important in optimizing muscle growth. Here we can see that all the slow groups have much higher activation by the end of the completion of the set. And this study went into very great detail. Here they have the myofibrillar FSR. And as you can see, after 1 day after exercise, the slow group was much higher. For mitochondria FSR, again, the slow group was much higher. And for the sarcoplasmic FSR, it was actually much higher at the 0 to 6 hour mark, along with the mitochondrial, but was barely higher after 24 hours. Now, that's very interesting, but how useful is that for an everyday lifter? I don't think this has much of an impact on how you should train or how you should change your routine. Sure, if you have an injury, I think doing some very high rep, very low intensity movements could be very beneficial. I mean, hell, that's exactly what they recommend for stuff like tendonitis. The issue is if you were going to do such high reps and such low intensity, but then increase the time under tension, you may not be getting as much of the rehab work that you think you're getting. You may just be getting an actual workout. But let's see what else the science has to say. Here we have the study, The Influence of Movement Tempo During Resistance Training on Muscular Strength and Hypertrophy Responses, a review. I think the key points is really what matters here. In addition to training loads, training volume, and rest intervals, movement tempo should be controlled and considered when planning and executing resistance training programs. Neither isolated, slow, nor fast movement tempos are more effective for muscle hypertrophy, but it seems that the most favorable is a combination of slower eccentric movements paired with faster concentric movements. Again, exploding with the weight on the way up. Slower movement tempos require decreased external load, yet when paired with greater time under tension can create an adequate stimulus to induce hypertrophy and strength gains. Faster concentric speeds are often thought to provide a better stimulus for neural adaptation than greater strength gains, but increasing the eccentric time under tension may help promote muscular hypertrophy, indirectly affecting strength found adversely affecting neural adaptations. Now, this review is amazing and will be linked in the description along with the rest of these studies. Here we have another one. Does tempo of resistance exercise impact training volume? And basically the final conclusion is yes, because of course it does. And here's another one we have, the effect of repetition duration during resistance training on muscle hypertrophy, a systematic review and meta-analysis. This study was pretty groundbreaking at the time, and basically what the main conclusion is, results indicate that hypertrophic outcomes are similar when training with repetition durations ranging from 0.5 to 8 seconds. From a practical standpoint, it would seem that a fairly wide range of repetition durations can be employed if the primary goal is to maximize muscle growth. Findings suggest that training at volitionally very slow durations, greater than 10 seconds per repetition, is inferior from a hypertrophy standpoint, although a lack of controlled studies on the topic makes it difficult to draw a definitive conclusion. So, what does this mean for you? I don't know. This is quickly becoming my catchphrase, but humans are confusing. The best thing I can probably do is to recommend this. 1. Lift the weight as explosively as possible. When the weight gets heavy or the sets get long, the positive will already naturally slow down, which will give you any of the benefits that may or may not exist from a slowed down concentric phase. 2. Lower the weight in a controlled manner. You probably don't need to count, which could potentially take focus away from your actual exercise, but if you're going to use very light weight, be it for like a volume day, a deload, injury, feel free to use a longer negative count, increasing time under tension. Obviously, if you go overboard, you're not going to be getting that great of an effect, or you may not actually be deloading or doing any rehab work you think that you're doing. And 3, I did not talk about the stretch position or being at the bottom of a rep and holding that for whatever amount of time. That does seem to have some impact on both hypertrophy and strength, but that will probably be saved for another video. And with that being said, that is the video. Guys, if I forgot something, please let me know down in the comments. I respond to every single one of them, and it really helps out the channel. If you like this style of content, you can hit the like and the subscribe button. I post a new video every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then while you're at it, you can follow all of these socials. The links are in the description. I post exercise content there twice a day, every single day. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.